Um, Thanks for joining us this afternoon. My name is Corey Sloan. I'm a consulting librarian with the State Library. This is our third webinar in our series on access and usability in libraries. We chose to focus on this series um, because it's really important. It's the right thing to do to serve our whole communities. Um, it's in the library standards to serve the whole community that everybody has safe, comfortable, and convenient access to library and library services, and that everybody has access to updated and regularly maintained physical and digital library content and services. We wanted to shed a little light on barriers for people with disabilities in libraries or other people who are traditionally disenfranchised or underrepresented. We want to connect people to ideas and resources that will help improve library services in your library, and encourage us to think about barriers that may exist in our libraries and brainstorm solutions. Today, our focus is specifically on traditional barriers to access in policy. We have a guest, formerly of Great Falls Public Library. We have Susie McIntyre joining us to talk about policy when we highlight Montana libraries um, a little bit later on. But today, specifically, let me click forward and hope we don't lose full screen. Today, specifically, we want to learn what policies can be barriers to access, learn about some alternative policies and best practices to employ. And then we hope that you will take this knowledge and apply it to your own policies um, going forward. So, that said, we're going to do something a little different. If you've joined for another one of these webinars previously, we have done a Mentimeter. This week, we're going to use a Zoom annotation tool. So, if you can click on the green pencil icon, mine is on the lower right side of my screen, but it says annotate. It looks like this little pencil. Um, and then you can choose an annotation tool like a star or a heart or a question mark or a arrow or anything fun like that. On the next slide, I'm going to have a question, and I'd love for you all to participate. Um, so going forward, have you assessed your policies through a lens of accessibility? If you want to take a second to use that annotation tool, cool, it's working. We have 10 people online, so I'm going to wait. I'm not going to do it, so I'm going to wait for a few more people. Oh, Mark got creative and used the drawing tool. Oh, Jennifer got creative and used the drawing tool. Yes. Cool. So at this point, we're looking about 50-50. That yellow flower was there before as an example. So we're looking about 50-50 on have you assessed your policies through the lens of accessibility. Great. Thank you. Oh, he was only creative by accident. That's what all the creatives will say. Um, okay. Um, so a little bit about policies in general before we kind of get going. Oh, sorry, I have to clear my mistake. Let me clear all that so it's not distracting. Um, so a little bit about policies just before we get going. Um, we know policies are really important. In public libraries, they are set by our boards, but enforced right by our library staff, implemented by library staff, hopefully have some input of library staff. Um, but the importance of the policy is to set expectations and rules, I hate to say, but rules for how the library is used, so that services are consistent and fair to everybody who uses the library. Um, they allow for rules to keep the library safe and welcoming to everyone. So it's not we try to frame our policies in positive lights instead of know this, know that, know this, where of course there are some things that have to be prohibitive. Um, we do try to frame policies um, in as positive light as possible. And ultimately, libraries are about access, but policies in nature can create barriers and be restrictive. So good policies should reflect the library's mission and community needs. I was hoping that people would be participatory online today and share in the chat what your library's mission is, if you know it, and if you think it's reflected in the policies that you have. So we're going to take a second. Hopefully people can type in the chat here. If you know your library's mission and if you think it's reflected in your policies. If you know your mission, please type it in. Mar County City Library is committed to promoting access to information. Oh, I'm too fast. Access to information, lifelong learning, and the love of reading. Great Falls College is to serve as a connection point. We connect patrons to information and services that they need. Paraphrase, verbatim for Bitterroot Public Libraries, mission to provide community residents from all walks of life with access to quality library services, supporting lifelong learning. I'm not going to read the whole thing, Mark, sorry. Do you all think your library mission is reflected in your policies? Thank you, everybody, for sharing. Madison Valley Public Library connects people to information, ideas, and programming, lifelong learning. Yes, I love to see some of the similar themes come up in here. Phillips County says yes. Mark says yes, more or less. Well, cool. I just wanted to um take that opportunity to see yeah, if people thought that their mission was reflected in their policies. Um you also should have your community needs in mind when you are developing these policies. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we when we go a little further in. Your policy should be current, comprehensive, and consistent. It is part of your state standards to review your policies every 4 years. So that keeps things current, comprehensive, and consistent. We'll talk a little bit more about consistency in a few slides as well. You want your policies to be easy to access and implement. That goes back to staff implementing policy. When it comes down to where the rubber hits the road and the library being open to patrons, Cam's favorite. Um, and then you also want to make sure your policies are legal and that they comply with all laws and regulations. So I said that we were going to talk about um, some policies that are traditional barriers to access. Well, so we're gonna keep these questions in mind um, when creating policies and when assessing our own policies. There's a lot of things to keep in mind, but these ones specifically, these are questions that specifically can help in your quest to make your policies more um, fair and equitable to all. So what could be the consequences of creating this policy? So just when writing policy, when creating policy, keeping that in mind. Are they fair to everyone? And then would the policy be difficult to enforce and are they enforced consistently? So the common inequities in policy that we're going to focus on today are late fees and fines, cardholder policies, and some behavior policies. I've found a lot of fun cartoons. Um, when you look up library stereotypes and things like that. This is a cartoon by Tom Stratton. Um, It's got your stacks in the background with a big quiet sign and a file cabinet, and your stereotypical old librarian with a bun and thick glasses. She's on the phone. She's got a kid on a chair in front of the desk that says, I'm not kidding around anymore, Mrs. Sharp. You have our book. We have your son. Um, and it's a joke, right? It's cartoon, but there's truth to it. The joke is that we'll do anything, right, to get back our books. And of course, we know libraries are more than books, so we're talking about our DVDs too. We are certainly talking about our hotspots. Can I get a yes for turning off hotspots just to get them back? Um, but it's kind of we laugh. We're library professionals, right? We think it's funny. But if you're on the other end of that phone call, and maybe you're not actually getting a phone call like that, I hope, it's not a very friendly, welcoming um, image to portray of the library. You give us our stuff back, or we will hold your son for ransom. Oh, I see, Jennifer. Still haven't got one back. Well, that's just the cost of doing business, right? Um, Anyway, so there's many comics and cartoons about this online, but before we talk about late fines and late fees, I just wanted to have a little laugh with everybody about this. But to also remind us that the the stereotype is a stereotype for a reason. And even though people think books won't always come back, um, is that the most important thing in your library? Getting all your books back or the image that you're sending to your community, and of welcoming or unwelcoming. So, another comic, Charlie Brown, love Charles Schultz. He's writing a letter to the library. Dear library, I've lost your book. I cannot find it anywhere. I'll come to the library and turn myself in. Please do not harm my mother and father. So it's kind of the reverse, right? Charlie Brown's concerned about his parents. So, late fees in general. Who do fines impact the most? Late fines can range 10 cents a day. I know interlibrary loan items can typically be a little more um, costly for late fines because it's another library's book. Um, but if you look at your community information um, and you can use state library dashboards to help find out information about your library. You can see who your library users are, and you can see what the impact of your library is. And then if you can compare that information with community demographic information, if you have multiple zip codes in your area, you can get demographics that more specifically broken out that way. Um, but you should be able to see, it's fairly clear that um, high cardholders that have high fine balances stop using the library. Um, whether that's materials that have gone lost completely, and their replacement fees, or it's just a high card balance of fines because there's 20 children's books that have been out for a month or two longer, then that just adds up. Even if your fines are 10 cents a day, if you have policies that dictate that cards are blocked after a fine gets to a certain dollar amount, and that family comes to use the library again and their card is blocked, they will not put all those books back. They will just drop them and leave the library with a frustration that I can't check anything out unless I pay this fee. Some libraries allow for credit debit payments. A lot of libraries still don't offer an easy payment option. So unless you have your cash money or your checkbook, that doesn't always work. Um, And it really does just kind of hinder access then for that family, and the next generation of library users that come from that experience. And people do, unfortunately, remember a negative experience. They'll remember a positive experience as well, but they'll share about a negative experience. That's unfortunately just the reality of the world. I encourage everybody to share about positive things just as many times as they share about negative things. Um, so I also want to point out fine revenue. Oftentimes, your fine revenue is going into a general fund. Um, if your fine revenue is a critical part of your operations budget, I think there are larger issues at play that might be of concern. Um, Typically, fine revenue does not go directly back into the library, um, and may not be missed or can be made up in other ways, by some other part of your local government. Um, I've seen some, I haven't been totally on the chat this session, but I have seen a little concern about returns. Um, there's concern that materials don't come back. They do come back. Every book's not going to come back, but every book's not going to come back even if you have fines. That's truly just the cost of doing business in a, trust-based world, or in a trust-based industry. Um, Not a trust-based world necessarily. We're ensuring that this collective item, this collective collection, can be used by me, can be used by my neighbor, can be used by my neighbor across the town. If I return my book and they can, um, rich, I can share that access with other people. So I did not link any of this data here, but there is a resource at the end of this presentation, that goes more into eliminating late fines and late fees. Um, and they have the data in their bibliography. So if you go into, if you want, if you don't believe me, that's fine. So there's ways I've seen a little bit in the chat about people who have gone fine free. If you have gone fine free or if you're thinking about it, please type that in the chat. I think that's awesome. I was just having fun finding library memes. Um, I don't really know. Now I can go to prom. That cat just looked like he was enjoying, like he paid my library fines. Now I can go to prom. Well, imagine if he didn't have to pay them at all. That poor kitten has now been robbed of his milk money. Um, so to go find free, we encourage knowing your community and tailoring your strategy. There's always going to be some naysayers who really believe that you need to charge fines so that people learn their personal responsibility, blah blah blah, etc. Tailor your message around that. Maybe you have a community who's really enthusiastic about it. Well, then great. You can just lean into their enthusiasm and have a big kickoff party. Excuse me. I talk a little bit on the next slide about having um, particular events for Fine Free. Um, an easy way to start the Fine Free process, if maybe you're not ready, um, is using automatic renewals. And if you're on the shared catalog in Montana, you can get on automatic renewals. Just put in a ServiceNow ticket, and our shared catalog team would be happy to hook you up. Um, you can also do things like adjusting length of checkout, um, offering extensions in certain situations, like for maybe items that have different checkout periods that are shorter for whatever reason. And then communicating with patrons. I saw in the chat, um, somebody said if people just let us know instead of ignoring us in our late notices and phone calls, we will forgive the fine. Yes, communication is key. And that goes both ways. I know I'm preaching to the choir here. Um, but sometimes, the phone call People will avoid the phone call. I will admit I'll avoid the phone call because I just am afraid to talk on the phone. Um, but communication, communicating with patrons is critical, um, and letting people know. And of course, when they check out, they know what their due date is, but still got to lay it out for everyone. Um, Another easy way to start is to start with limiting fines in youth departments. It looks like a lot of people online who have been fine free for a long time. Um, it's probable that you've done these events as well, like a read off your fines event or a fine amnesty day, or like a bring back your materials, no questions asked, we're not judging you. Food for fines is really popular. I know that before Bozeman Public Library went fine free, they participated in a Can the Grizz event for the big Cat Grizz football game every year. Um, but those are easy ways to get started if you're not fine free already. So moving on from fines, I'll talk a little bit about card holder policies and a few ways that these can be barriers to access and maybe some other ways to get around them. Um, Thinking about what your ID requirements are for getting a library card. Um, of course, we know that taxpayer money fund most library operations. So you want to make sure that the people who are holding your library cards and using your library services live within your service population area. Depending on where you live in the state, you might have people who moved to your community 3 years ago and never bother to update their driver's license. Or the DMV is just really inconveniently far away, and it's just not working out with their work schedule. Um, do you trust when somebody says, "Well, I live over here, but my ID says I'm from Georgia, but I moved here 5 years ago." Um, I'm curious what people do if you have community members who do not have a permanent address who would like library cards. Um, what I'm curious, I'm genuinely curious, and if you have anything to comment about that in the chat, I can speak about experience at Bozeman Public Library. Um, they were allowed to use the address of the shelter in town if that was somewhere that they were staying, um, or PO boxes if that was something that they had. Um, the question of who can get a library card, that's always interesting. I think most libraries are pretty um, open about it. There's usually an out of out of county or out of area fee if you do not live locally in that area. But something that's interesting is a pretty high percentage of people think that you need to pay for a library card, regardless of where you live. Um, so again, with the stereotyping and things like that, um, people don't always realize that the libraries are free. They can't believe all this value that they would get, right? For nothing. But really, they don't realize that they've already paid for it. Um, so for behavior policy, a few things I just wanted to touch on. Um, there are ways that behavior policies can be written that need to be, um, I don't want to say sensitive, but just aware of the language being used. There's certain things, um, disruptive loud noises, for example. That's typically in behavior policy, no disruptive loud noises. Um, there can be um, behavioral um, disabilities that have loud noises and those sorts of exceptions that can be made. And when I say that, and I also say enforcing library policy fairly, I understand that that's like a pretty uh, fine line to walk. And that's just something I wanted to bring up. I don't have answers for everybody. I don't have um, a hard and fast rule to follow on that. But it's just something to be aware of when staff is when behaviors come up and staff is addressing it using the policy, to think about fairness and equity, um, and the library for all as well. So that's what I wanted to touch on there for everyone. So examples of policies that are typically really well defined for accessibility and usability. You want to aim for policies that ensure these access to library services, meeting room policies. Oftentimes, in meeting room policies and programming policies, you will see language offering accommodations, whether it's requesting advanced notice for accommodations, but making sure that accommodations are offered and spelled out. I think we typically do a really good job of doing that with our collections, but extending that further to programs and offering accommodations there as well. I also would encourage including an ADA statement, statement of compliance when possible. That can also include, or that can be located in a service animal policy or a statement about service animals, and the accommodations that you will allow in your building. Most libraries, right, are animal-free, pet-free zones, but service animals are exceptions because of an ADA. So mentioning that within your policy um, is just kind of a safety for you. I don't think I mentioned this at the beginning, but policies are also a safety for libraries. It's what you can use to back up any sort of decisions made in uh, leadership. Um, with service animal policies, we will be talking about service animals at great length next session. But you can also line out the behavior expected of a service animal. Um, Typically, service animals have behavior expectations by their handlers, but it's okay to state that they must be well behaved and in the company of their handler at all times. That's okay to state that in your policy. Um, so I used that picture last week, but I thought that dog was so cute. Thank you everybody for being participatory in the chat. It's really nice to just peek at some of these um, cool things that people are doing around the state. So thanks, everybody. I'm going to pass the torch to our good friend Susie from Great Falls. She's also created a few slides. I will mute myself, but I'll still run the slideshow. So I will move to your slide and you just tell me when.
Awesome, thanks. So I'm just going to say I am currently an employee of Great Falls College MSU for a totality of 5 weeks, and I spent 2 decades at Great Falls Public Library. So these are comments, my own comments. They are not affiliated with either entity, but most of my experience is from Great Falls Public. So I think it's really important that we break down barriers. So I was really honored and excited that when Corey talked to me about this. I'm going to snap when it's time to click, Corey. So I think it's really important. I'm all about having explicit conversations. I think one thing that happens is lots of libraries, we do what we do, and we've done it that way for a really long time. So having explicit conversations with the board and with the staff about what your library cultural values are. And I think it's also really important to just put on the table, hey, there's segments of our community that don't feel like they belong here. I know in Great Falls, we have tried to be doing a lot of, Great Falls Public Library has tried to do a lot of outreach to Indigenous communities. And what we have heard is libraries are seen as very white spaces and that they are not welcome there. So then you have to do explicit outreach and change and conversation to understand how you can change and how you can have a conversation to make people feel more welcome. Are my things coming in one at a time? So we usually have a lot of library cultural values that are pretty standard: intellectual freedom, open access, literacy, customer service. But, really thinking and talking about how much does your library value including everyone, and what does everyone mean for you? I'm so okay, next. So how do you build a culture of inclusion? Um, and I think, in the chat a little bit, we had a little bit of back and forth about what does it mean to be fair? And people have very different ideas of what fair means and what inclusion means. And the only way for you to figure out what your community thinks and what your library think is to have the conversations. I think it's important to acknowledge that in the public library context, a lot of the times we're dealing with huge scarcity. And so like you don't even have enough bodies to, have the door open, but you want to have these staff-wide conversations and board-wide conversations. So figuring out how to have those conversations and still serve your people is important. And then next. So when you do your mission and vision and values, I know at Great Falls Public Library, we had 5 values. And one of the things we talked about is that some of them are in conflict with each other. We have a value of, customer service. We also have a value of excellent fiscal stewardship. So what happens when, the Rainbow Assisted Living Place wants us to come every day to pick up books? Well, we can't do that, even though we're customer focused and that's a big need from this particular group. We don't have the finances to do that. But you need to have those conversations so that you can be thoughtful about them. And I think when we look at policies and procedures, we need to look at them through a variety of lenses and getting people to come and give feedback can be really important. During the Great Falls Public Library's master plan process, we actually did a bunch of focus groups where we specifically targeted like military folks or parents or faith communities or our Indigenous communities or our students, and really kind of tried to drill down on how that impacts people. So that was a really important piece for us. And I think it's also super important that you really get staff training and buy-in. Staff need to understand what the policy is, why the policy has been created, and how they are to enforce it. There are some policies that Great Falls Public Library chose to institute, even though we knew they had a negative impact on certain populations. Like Great Falls Public Library does not allow sleeping at the library. It was a safety issue. We had some health issues with diabetes and with overdoses. And although we heard from our unhoused community that not being able to sleep at the library was a real barrier because they didn't get to sleep other places, and being in a warm, safe space, a lot of people were nodding off. We deliberately chose to still have that policy because we felt that the safety issue outweighed the fact that it had a more negative impact on our unhoused population. We need to really empower staff to enforce and to make exceptions and to listen more to the community. And we always try to lean toward yes. And then one thing we found in working with our staff is that we really needed to show the staff that this does have an impact on our patrons. Because if we're just doing it to kind of do the flavor of the month, People find that annoying. So we really wanted to make that happen. So, I think it's really easy to be like, oh, we have good, consistent, fair policies, but we really decided to kind of wrestle with the really tough issues. And so we had actual conversations about, okay, so we hear from some of our Christian friends and patrons that when we have an LGBTQ display, they do not feel welcome. We hear from some of our LGBTQ members that if we do not have highlight those sorts of materials, they do not feel welcome. So how do we deal with that? And what we decided was that more speech is better. So rather than saying, well, we're not going to have displays that make other people feel offended, we kind of went the other way and we're like, we're going to have so many displays that we want everybody to feel offended at least once a year. So we celebrated Christian materials, we celebrated both progressive, conservative, all sorts of those sorts of materials. We celebrated Buddhist materials. We actually had a huge calendar of all sorts of religious celebrations, and we made sure that we did a Diwali, we did a Ramadan, we did Hanukkah. We tried to hit all of them. And the same with the LGBTQ materials. We made sure we had a variety of displays. I think we had probably one of the biggest issues that we dealt with the most is we have a lot of people that feel like they don't feel safe at the library. And for me, this is one of the ones where we didn't fully balance the needs of different people because turns out it's illegal to discriminate based on housing status. So we made our policies so that clearly everyone is welcome at the library, regardless of their housing status. And then we really doubled down on fair and consistent enforcement of patron behavior policies. So everyone goes through, all the staff go through an orientation where we clearly say, 3 young men come in suits, 3 young men come in with face tats and pants below their bum. You treat them exactly the same. And, role playing that, working with that. And then also being involved on the community level of like, okay, so we're not going to discriminate against unhoused people, but we are hearing from patrons that they feel unsafe. So what are other things that we can do to make people feel more safe? So hiring safety specialists, having more visibility, making sure you really enforce and double down on, you got to be sober to be in the library. You can't have too much stuff. You have, dropping F-bombs everywhere. So, but I think that one thing that was really important is that we valued making sure everyone felt welcome, and we acknowledged that these were tough questions that we were willing to engage in. And then the other thing for balancing competing needs is we kind of tried to oversample in listening to people that weren't at the library as much. So, the white women in book clubs are overrepresented in the people that come to our library and check out books, and we love them and we want to serve them. And our young Indigenous men and women are underserved, so we want to do more reach out and do more listening to them. But that we also weren't afraid to say, well, we are going to have a policy that has a disproportionate impact on somebody. If we felt that safety issues outweighed that. And this was a real deliberate process that we went through for a whole year. We had a group of staff people that looked at every policy and talked about how it would impact patrons and had discussions about the different patron groups that it would impact. And I'm always happy to talk to people about how that went. It was very hard. And then the next slide. So practical steps. you know, I think everybody should eliminate late fees. They don't serve your mission. They disproportionately impact people in poverty. Um, I already talked a little bit about the intentional review of policies and procedures, trying to see through, there's been a lot of good chat about the lenses, and also doing the same thing for programs. I think it's really important to not feel like we need to be neutral and we have to have equal. In the Great Falls Public Library collection, in whatever collection you have, if 80% of your population is Christian, you don't need to have a Buddhist book for every Christian book, but you do need to have Buddhist books. So making sure that you're looking also at your programs. Just because you have something from American Prairie doesn't mean that you have to have something that's kind of anti-American Prairie. But the idea is that if you have a rich offering of programs, that they will hopefully allow everybody to have different perspectives. And we also have been doing a lot of trying to get community members to provide the programs and inviting people in to speak about their lived experience, rather than us curating what we think people need to learn. Um, and then really looking at our spaces and displays and who we're centering, and what do people feel like when they come into the library, and then also just really focusing on building relationships, which goes back to scarcity, which goes back to, library directors are busy, staff are busy, so how are you gonna, go to the continuum of care meetings? How are you going to go, to the Indigenous Peoples Day planning group? And so how you spend your time is a real measure of breaking down those barriers, because you can't break down the barriers if you don't understand the people you're serving. And I think is that my last one?
Yes, that is. You had one on questions, but I also had one on questions, so I combined them. Thank
Excellent.
thank you, Susie. That was great to hear from you. It's I'm sure that the review process of your policy, like going through, and you're at a bigger organization where you had staff for some small libraries where it's you and the board. Um, but since policies do need to be reviewed every few years, it's good to ask the hard questions and think, who will this impact if we make this change, or if we take away this policy or change the wording here to say for everyone, or oh, sorry, I just bumped my camera. Um,
And
go
and
ahead.
I'm seeing Melissa's comment about staff, and that is a really, really good point. I mean, I believe that the staff of our libraries should reflect the community that we serve. And especially in this day and age, that can be really difficult. Um, like I know I had conversations with the city of Great Falls HR about wanting a more diversified staff, and they were like, well, how are you going to do that? And I was like, well, you know, you get paid a lot of money to be the HR lady that has all the letters behind her name. So I thought maybe you could work on that. Um, but I think that's a really good point, and I think it's something that librarians need to work on as a profession.
Yeah, having everybody be able to see themselves in a library, um, like as a librarian, or even just as a patron, but that representation is so powerful. And I think it extends further than we even really know. And yes, most cameras aren't on in here, but the brown hair glasses stereotype goes far in librarianship. uh,
Are you looking at me? Because my hair's
no,
in a bun, I'm wearing glasses, and I have a cardigan on.
I'm not wearing my glasses today, or the contacts. Um, what questions do we have? I'm gonna have a hard time if I just have to go through the chat. Please feel free to unmute yourself. Melissa, I'm sorry, I don't know where you're from in the state or maybe potentially out of state. Um, just out of curiosity, but awfully quiet for questions. Awfully quiet for questions. We have a handy dandy evaluation survey. Um, if you all would like to give us some feedback, we love data at the state. Um, you can follow that QR code or take that form link that Coley just dropped in the chat. If you just want to spend a minute or two sharing that, sharing your thoughts with us, we would appreciate that. There We're officially halfway done with this series. There are three remaining webinars in this series. On February 24th, in 2 weeks, we'll um, be hearing from the Rocky Mountain ADA Center about service animals. I know that is a hot topic in libraries always. March 10th, 2 weeks after that, meeting people where they are, homebound services and other things along those lines with Montana History Portal's Jen Burnell. And on March 24th, hopefully will be more discussion based. Where do we go from here? We're going to hear from people all around the state who've been doing really cool projects. We'll have spotlights from Montana librarians in the other sessions as well. And I hope you all have gotten a lot out of um, this session here today. A couple additional resources here. Policy development resource that we've got for you on MSL Learn Lawful and Fair with Chris Goss. There's also more information on eliminating library fines if you're not fine free already. Um, and that's my contact information. I'm sorry I didn't include yours, Susie. I don't know if you wanted to include yours. I just
Um,
forgot to ask you.
I'm good.
Okay, well, if you have a question for Susie, you can ask me and I'll get it to her by carrier pigeon. Um, please, if you have any other questions, we still have 10 minutes. Um, don't let my stuffed up nose fool you. Otherwise,
Well, I'm interested. Do other libraries allow sleeping? Anybody?
as of 2024, Bozeman, yes.
They allow sleeping in the Bozeman Public Library.
Yes. As of 2024.
Yeah, we haven't had an issue with it here in at Bitterroot Public Library. If we did, we probably would pass one similar to Great Falls or I think Missoula, where it's kind of like staff reserve the right to check in on you if you're sleeping to make sure it's not a medical emergency or something like that. And um, yeah,
Yeah, we're to the point. Great Falls Public Library. My pronouns are everywhere. I refer to every library in Great Falls as we. Um, it that if we have to wake you up the third time in a day, we have to ask you to leave because we just didn't have the staff capability of continuing to check in on people.
Sometimes it's hard to wake people up, and that can be really scary. You, we had I do that with Bozeman too. Every library is we don't want to touch people, like we are not physically touching anybody else's body and nobody's physically touching ours. So if we can't wake you up with our voice or something like that. Um, I went to a really interesting session a few years ago at a big national conference. Um, and they did a hot ones with public library directors from pretty major urban libraries around the country, like San Jose, Denver, Boston, like pretty big urban areas. But they did a hot ones, uh, spicy takes, and one of the questions, like, they're not going to debate it. It's, do you allow sleeping in libraries? Yes, no, yes, no. They go down the line. One question was, what do you do about bathrooms? And that actually real something that was said there really struck me because oftentimes like single use bathrooms would cause for people using the bathrooms in inappropriate ways, or being staff being locked out of a bathroom for a very long period of time. And an answer that stuck with me for a long time was taking off the main doors of a bathroom that has individual stalls so that there's still privacy, but it's not so private that maybe you think it's a place to sleep or bathe or do anything else. Which is always really interesting, but that hot ones really stuck with me. It was pretty much anything spicy about libraries. They just answered it. They didn't debate it, but it was the sleeping question, yes or no. Um, and it really varies. It really seemed to vary nationwide. And this was also probably in 2024. I don't know that so much has changed in our country in the last 2 years. That would change the general sentiment. But like I said, it was pretty split.
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. And I mean, I think one of the issues that I have is I lean toward it's not hurting you, don't worry about it. When people complain about other people, but when we did the focus groups, it was really, I had to really look at that because there were parents that were like, yeah, I really wish I could come to story time, but I don't feel safe. I don't bring my kids to story time. And so I had to really check okay, so I've just been, the homeless person sitting on the bench is not bothering you, so I'm not going to worry about it. But then also realizing that right or wrong, the lived experience of these parents was that they could not bring their children. And so that was their lived experience. And so we had to address that. And it was really hard to look at my own philosophical stuff about, just mind your own business and everybody's welcome here. And then how do we pull that group in when I'm like, stop being a Karen, just come, just bring your kid. So that was one of my moments where I had to grow a little bit. I don't think I don't think anybody's solved that, but it is very difficult.
No, but it's interesting to hear about your process too. I imagine that would be, yeah, I imagine I would go through something similar. So
Yeah.
interesting.
One just kind of interesting thing about the topic of displays, our library is way undersized. We're 12,000 square feet and serve over or right around 30,000 people. So, if you do the math on that, we're kind of busting at the seams. So we've just never had a good place to do displays. We do have new books, that are displayed. There's about 12 that are sort of like right on the hold shelf in the front of the library between the two circulation desks, and then some other ones on some slat wall displays around the corner. But um, you know, we've never been able to really do displays for different months or different topics or different things like that. And at first, there's some hand wringing and hem and hawing and sort of, oh, we should try to figure out a way to, shoehorn in a display or do this or do that. And the limited attempts we had always ended up something, well, I want to see a display about this. I wanted to see a display about that. And, sort of that like interest group sort of, advocacy of displays. And we just sort of gave up on doing any displays other than the new books, which at so first sort of felt like a defeat. But then I just remember distinctly, it's happened several times, looking at the 12 new books that we have on the hold shelf and recognizing that every month of the year, just based on our collection development policy and what comes out, that those 12 books are actually pretty diverse and representative of our community, regardless of the month. And what's interesting about that is it's sort of like, if you're the person that comes in and gets irritated because there's one out of 12 books that is something you don't agree with, you kind of feel, I don't want to say foolish because I don't want to belittle or denigrate people, but it is sort of like, wow, there's 11 other books you could look at. But when it is sort of whatever the topic is, and it's the whole thing, it makes it look like libraries are advocating and have an agenda, which, there's discussions about that, whether that's right or wrong, whether we should, but it makes it sort of harder to defend certain criticisms when it's a whole display, regardless of how meritorious they are and worth defending, than when it's um, just one or two books that's, by, probably having those things. And what's interesting too, just from a sort of I don't say from a labor standpoint, but the people that are going to be fielding those complaints about the displays, first off, are going to be the lowest paid employees. They're going to be the frontline workers that have somebody come in there and say that they're XYZ. And then, oh, okay, would you like to speak to the director? No, I've already vented. I'm done. I've, taken my anger out on you. I'm headed out now. Sometimes they do escalate it to where, they are talking to the person that can hopefully have a real good faith conversation with them about it. But a lot of times it is just they want to make some snarky comment to somebody and then be on their way. And yeah, it's just been an interesting thing where I'm sort of, it was a situation we ended in not necessarily through thinking it all the way through, which isn't great. It's just sort of like, well, these are the cards we're dealt with the space we have with, what we can do. But it sort of ended up into something where, yeah, I think, yeah, dodging a bullet, yeah, it's certainly a way of, it just sort of avoids, I don't know, a lot of things that I think are, some of them are worth doing. Some of them I think maybe don't have the impact we wish they would or think they might. But it's interesting where I've landed with it and sort of, just to circle all the way back, it's sort of like if you're doing a good job, and I don't, mean to say good job, but a proper collection development should mean that there's materials that represent every aspect and identity of your community 12 months out of the year, over there on the new bookshelf for people to come through. And so I think that's sort of where I've sort of turned that defeat, at least through my lens, into sort of a victory of like it makes me very careful of like looking at our new books, to this, to that, not enough this, not enough that. And that's kind of been helpful.
I think that's really good. What a brilliant way of looking at it.
Lemonade out of lemons, I guess. We do
Yeah,
need more space. When we do have a bigger library, which we're working on, I will be very curious what space we plan for displays, if any, or if we just, continue this model.
yeah, I really like our model of just the Great Falls Public Library model of just doubling down and being like, we're going to celebrate everything, and trying to have these three books about this and that, so that there's just because if you only do one big display a month, people you can't do it in a way that you're not going to get complaints. Oh my goodness, and Amy's on. So she actually, sorry for talking about your library, Amy.
Fun stuff. Fun stuff. I was gonna look for a spreadsheet that pulled up the cubic foot per patron that we have, but I couldn't get to it fast enough. I can't remember where the Bitterroot Library falls, pretty low. I think on the ratio of space.
I think it's supposed to be about one per capita. So if you have 100,000 people in your county, you want like 100,000 square feet or something.
We have a
Maybe
list, I
look
just
into
can't
it.
find it at the
Yeah.
moment. Too many things at once. Um, Thanks for hanging in with us till the bitter end, everybody. Um, this has been fun, at least for me. I hope it's been fun for you all as well. I hope you learned something. I hope you can take this back to your library. Um, we'll see you next time. Susie, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a joy to see you.
Love seeing everyone. Okay, bye bye.
Thank you.